say don't. You'll be proud of me, OG. Woke up, read me a Bible verse, got some breakfast in my system, talked to God about it. You know what I'm saying? And he laid it on me. I got one more album, EP, mixtape, whichever one it's gonna be, I got one more. And it's over, I'm going to find my peace.
A 25-year-old rapper who survived the bullets that killed his homies, built real money with Yo Gotti, and stood in rooms most kids from his block never even see. But in the end, he could not survive his own mind. Lil Poppa's final tweets were deeply disturbing. "I'm scared to go to sleep," he wrote. "And I'm lonely, bro. And somebody going to die." The words did not sound like promotion. They sounded like a warning. 3 days later, he was found dead in Atlanta. And when you line up the timeline, when you look at the pressure, the trauma, and what he had been carrying for years, it forces a harder question. What really pushed Jacksonville's most promising artist over the edge? The answer is uncomfortable. Lil Poppa was not just another rapper from Jacksonville. He was the one who actually made it out. Signed to Yo Gotti's CMG label, pulling in millions of streams, building a future that looked brighter than what most from his city ever realistically get to imagine. On paper, it looked like a success story. But success does not erase trauma. It does not silence memories.
Man, any young niggas on here right now, it's more to life, man. It's more to life.
The 2018 shooting that helped elevate his name also fractured something inside him. People saw the survival. They did not see the damage. To understand how a young man with money, recognition, and opportunity ended up taking his own life, you have to go back to the beginning. Back before the fame. Back before the label. Back to Jacksonville. Jacksonville, Florida is not just another southern city. The murder rate sits at more than double the national average. Violence is not rare there. It is familiar. It shapes childhoods. It reshapes families. In that environment, young men either find a narrow exit or they become part of the statistics. Lil Poppa, born Jarius, was raised between two worlds inside the same city. His mother's place on the east side, his grandmother's home on the west side. Different neighborhoods, same tension. His mother tried to shield him, keeping him in church, trying to anchor him in something stable. And it was there, inside that church, that his gift first became visible. At 6 years old, he was writing Christian rhymes and performing in front of congregations. It was not random talent. It was focused. His older brother Chichi showed him how to rap, and Poppa absorbed it quickly. Family members noticed. This was not a child playing around with a hobby. There was structure in his flow, confidence in his delivery. His grandmother's house became more than a place to stay. It became a sanctuary, a controlled space where he could refine his sound away from the noise outside. But in Jacksonville, the streets do not stay distant forever. Eventually, they call your name. When Poppa stepped into that reality, his lyrics shifted. The tone hardened. The environment around him was violent on both sides of town. The east side, where his mother lived, had its own reputation. The west side, where his grandmother stayed, carried different conflicts but the same outcomes. He saw shootings. He saw friends locked up. He saw funerals come too early. That pain did not stay buried. It entered his music. And that is where people began to connect with him. What separated Poppa from many others was that he never abandoned the idea of something bigger. Even while his body was working against him, he was dealing with a chronic blood disease that could leave him bedridden for days, sometimes weeks. That kind of condition can break a young person's momentum. It can derail ambition. But instead of folding, he adapted. He built a small studio inside his grandmother's closet so he could record without leaving the house. While others were outside moving recklessly, he was inside sharpening his craft. That level of discipline did not happen by accident. His family supported the music, but they also carried quiet fear. They understood Jacksonville's history with young rappers. The city had already produced too many funerals, too many headlines, too many what could have been stories. They saw the potential in him, but they also knew how fragile opportunity can be in a place like that. Poppa, however, moved with determination. By 14, he released his first music video. Over the next few years, he stayed consistent. Singles, mixtapes, building momentum piece by piece. The local scene began to take him seriously. This was not another teenager chasing attention. This was an artist building something calculated. And that foundation would eventually carry him far beyond Jacksonville. But it would also carry the weight of everything he had seen. This was not hype. This was somebody with real skill, real stories, and the discipline to match it. The foundation had already been laid, but in 2018, everything shifted. And not in the way most people assume when they hear that year attached to his name. Before getting to what ultimately broke Poppa's spirit, it is necessary to understand the climate he was moving through. Jacksonville's rap scene in the late 2000s and into the next decade was volatile. Not competitive in a healthy sense. Volatile. Young and Ace was beefing with Foolio. Neighborhood lines were not just symbolic. They were territorial. Young rappers were pulled into street politics whether they intended to be or not. Alignment was rarely optional. Poppa and his circle formed a group called Cut Circle. Publicly, they framed it as a music collective. Law enforcement, however, believed there were deeper street ties connected to it. That perception alone increased scrutiny. And in a city already on edge, perception can be enough to escalate tension. Their primary rivals were associated with a group known as Head First. What started as lyrical back and forth did not remain confined to songs. It moved into real-world encounters. What complicates the narrative is that Poppa and Foolio were not always enemies. Early on, they were cool. They recorded together when both were still building their names. There was a time when the rivalry did not exist. That history matters because it shows how quickly alliances in Jacksonville could fracture. At some point, something shifted. The story of what happened next depends on who is telling it. A fistfight broke out at a Foot Locker inside a mall. According to Foolio, social media comparisons between him and Poppa sparked the tension. Foolio claimed he commented that he was the better rapper. In one interview, he said Poppa had been sneak dissing him on tracks. In another, he described a mall encounter where Poppa was being disrespectful, followed by one of Poppa's associates dissing Foolio's deceased brother. The versions changed. The outcome did not. Video footage surfaced of the altercation. It showed Foolio and others fighting Poppa. It was not a life-threatening event. No one walked away critically injured. But what it ignited lasted far longer than the punches thrown that day. From that point forward, the exchanges intensified. Foolio dissed Poppa on records. Poppa responded in his own music. The lines stopped being clever and started becoming personal. The disrespect escalated to the point where Poppa referenced Foolio's deceased brother, 8-Ball, during an Instagram live session and on tracks. That shifted the tone entirely. Foolio responded by dissing Poppa's close friend, Corbin Johnson, who would later be kidnapped and found murdered. At that stage, this was no longer about who had the better flow. Real loss was being weaponized in public. Real grief was turned into content. Another layer came from K Shorty, a rapper associated with 6 Block, who began dissing Poppa's late brother, Lil Leaky. On tracks, he referenced smoking on Mechi and Leaky, and said he was not worried about others. He was looking for Poppa. Poppa fired back by referencing the tragic death of 17-year-old Mandy Wise, who was killed in crossfire during what was alleged to be an attempt on K Shorty's life. Every diss carried the weight of an actual funeral behind it. All of this unfolded while Poppa was trying to build a legitimate career. Label meetings, studio sessions, marketing pushes. At the same time, his name was circulating in cycles of retaliation and retaliation talk. Imagine attempting to focus on streaming numbers while monitoring who might be targeting you. Imagine recording in a booth while someone is publicly disrespecting your dead friends or family members. That was not occasional tension. That was daily reality. The psychological toll of that environment does not always show immediately. It builds. It lingers. It changes how a person moves, how they sleep, how they trust. Poppa was navigating success and hostility simultaneously. And in 2018, the event that elevated his name nationally would also deepen the internal damage he was already carrying. To understand what ultimately fractured him, the focus has to shift to that moment. The incident that made him famous, but quietly dismantled something inside him. In 2018, Poppa was riding with his homies. Not industry friends, not temporary alliances. These were the same young men he grew up with. The ones who knew him before the cameras, before the streams, before the label conversations. In a city like Jacksonville, that kind of loyalty runs deep. They were young, ambitious, trying to carve something out of an environment that rarely gives second chances. But on that day, the trajectory changed. Multiple sources confirmed that Poppa and his crew were caught in a drive-by shooting. What started as another day moving through familiar streets turned into chaos within seconds. When the gunfire stopped and the smoke cleared, it was no longer just another close call. 2 to 3 of his closest friends were dead. Reports differ on the exact number, but all agree on the outcome. Multiple homies did not make it home that night. The part that stayed with Poppa was not just the loss. It was the fact that he survived without a single bullet touching him. Not a scratch. While the people he called brothers were bleeding out beside him. One of the victims was his close friend CP, someone he had been tight with for years. Another friend, Chevy, was injured while trying to shield Poppa during the shooting. That detail matters. Someone was hurt trying to protect him. That kind of reality does not fade. The psychological impact was immediate, devastating. What clinicians describe as survivor's guilt began to take hold. The internal questions start quietly and then grow louder. Why them and not me? Why did the bullets miss me? What makes my life worth more? There are no answers that satisfy those questions. And when they go unanswered long enough, they become weight. Instead of suppressing it, Poppa put it into music. He released Purple Hearts, and the lyrics were not subtle. I wonder why them bullets ain't hit me, why they miss me. Rather be gone, take me out my misery. That line was not metaphor, it was confession. It reflected a young man wishing he had taken the place of his friends. That is not bravado. That is survivor's remorse. The song continued with another layer. Detectives try to frame me. Interrogation. They blame me. Wish I could take it back to the day that my mama made me. So while he was grieving, he was also sitting in interrogation rooms. Law enforcement reportedly questioned him, attempting to build a case, treating him not just as a victim, but as a potential suspect. Imagine surviving a shooting that killed your closest friends, and then being forced to defend yourself under bright lights in a police station. The chorus carried even more weight. Purple heart for them soldiers. Niggas gone. Fearless. Gotta make it out before they come and kill us. It was not entertainment. It was documentation. A trauma journal delivered over production. Every verse exposed what was happening inside his head. And then came the irony. Purple Hearts became his breakout record. Over 6 million views on YouTube. The most painful chapter of his life became the song that introduced him to a national audience. The trauma that nearly broke him became the reason the industry paid attention. That kind of contradiction does not sit cleanly. It forces a person to relive their worst memory repeatedly in front of strangers. The success was real. It put him on the map. It demonstrated his ability to translate raw emotion into art. But it also meant that every performance reopened the wound. Every time the beat dropped on stage, he was transported back to the moment his friends were lying on the ground. Fame did not create distance from the memory. It amplified it. Purple Hearts caught the attention of major figures in the industry, including Polo G. Momentum built quickly. In 2019, Poppa signed with Rule No. 1 in partnership with Interscope Records. From the outside, it looked like validation, like confirmation that he had survived for a reason. But internally, the questions had not disappeared. They had only grown heavier. The real shift came in April 2022 when Yo Gotti signed him to CMG. That moment changed the scale of everything. CMG, Collective Music Group, was not just another label looking for potential, it was one of the strongest forces in the industry at the time. Moneybagg Yo, 42 Doug, ESTG. Artists who were dominating charts and shaping conversations. When Gotti puts his name behind you, it signals that you are built to compete at the highest level. For Poppa, that signature meant validation. It meant someone at the top saw something more than raw street credibility. Gotti recognized that Poppa had depth. He was a young artist from Jacksonville who had survived the streets, but he could also articulate pain in a way that extended beyond one neighborhood. Poppa was not confined to typical street narratives. He was willing to explore grief, mental health, and survival with honesty that most rappers avoid. That made him different. The business side reflected it quickly. Millions of streams on Spotify, major label support, collaborations and studio sessions with established names. The image of him recording inside his grandmother's closet was replaced by professional studios and high-level producers. Financially, it was transformative. He was earning more than most people in his neighborhood would ever see in a lifetime. But money does not rewrite the past. It does not erase trauma. The same survivor's guilt from 2018 remained. The same chronic blood disease continued to affect his daily life. The same memories followed him into every session. Success layered new pressure on top of unresolved wounds. Now there were expectations, deadlines, a label expecting results, fans waiting for consistency, a team relying on his performance. He released his Under Investigation mixtape series, documenting street life and survival with detail that felt unfiltered. Listeners in Jacksonville heard their own reality reflected back at them. At the same time, audiences far outside Florida connected to the emotional weight in his delivery. His storytelling was specific, but the pain was universal. That duality expanded his reach. The numbers confirmed it. Millions of monthly listeners, videos accumulating views. A growing fan base that extended beyond regional support. On paper, the trajectory was upward. The industry narrative framed it as momentum. But industry momentum carries its own cost. Touring schedules, constant studio time, the pressure to maintain visibility, the expectation to create content consistently. Behind every successful release is a business machine that does not slow down. For someone already carrying unresolved trauma, that environment can intensify existing fractures. What distinguished Poppa from many of his peers was his refusal to sanitize his experiences. Reports consistently highlighted how his music addressed mental health, grief, trust issues, and survivor's guilt with uncommon clarity. He did not avoid depression as a topic. He did not dilute loss into vague metaphors. He confronted it directly. Hip-hop publications described his catalog as emotionally transparent. His lyrics explored internal battles that many artists hint at but rarely dissect. Young listeners connected because they recognized themselves in the themes. The grief, the paranoia, the fear of losing more people, the exhaustion of carrying trauma quietly. Yet, there was a contradiction developing. The same vulnerability that drew fans in did not automatically resolve the struggles he was writing about. Public praise for honesty does not replace private healing. While audiences applauded his transparency, he was still navigating those battles in real time. From the outside, it looked like growth. From the inside, the weight had not lifted. It had only become more complicated. The chronic blood disease he had battled since childhood never disappeared. In a 2021 DJ Booth interview, he openly acknowledged that the condition would leave him bedridden at times. Days, sometimes longer. That reality did not pause just because he signed a deal. Imagine being a nationally recognized artist, expected to perform, travel, create, and deliver, while some mornings your body refuses to cooperate. Physical weakness layered on top of psychological strain. At the same time, Jacksonville's environment never stopped shaping his instincts. Multiple accounts describe Poppa as living in a constant state of hypervigilance, always scanning, always anticipating the next threat. The analysis surrounding Purple Hearts made it clear that the sound of gunshots was not abstract to him. It was triggering. He reportedly heard them frequently and remained mentally prepared for violence at all times. That is not paranoia without cause. That is conditioning. He spoke about frustration, anger, a sense of emotional blockage, feeling trapped in circumstances he could not fully escape. Even tears felt inaccessible. Growing up in a city like Jacksonville teaches survival, but it rarely teaches healing. Financial escape does not guarantee mental release. Every gunshot echoed back to 2018. Every new loss reinforced the question that never left him. Why am I still here? His Instagram bio offered a stark window into his mindset. First we're born, next we suffer, then we die. The end. That is not promotional language. That is worldview. It suggests someone who saw life as a brief interval of pain between two fixed points. Even during his most commercially successful period, that perspective was publicly attached to his name. In August 2025, he released an album titled Almost Normal Again. The title itself reads like a confession. Almost. Not fully. It implies he was attempting to regain stability but had not arrived there. It acknowledges imbalance without disguising it. The phrase suggests there was a time when he felt normal, perhaps before 2018, before the funerals, before the interrogation rooms, before the burden of being the one who survived. He was reaching backward for that version of himself. But trauma does not dissolve through ambition. It does not fade because a record performs well. In the weeks leading up to his death, his social media activity reflected something deeper than industry pressure. The posts were there. They just blended into the constant stream of content. I'm scared to go to sleep. I'm lonely, bro. Is it okay to cry? I never asked for any of this. I shed all my tears in the dark. I thought they was loyal, but the jewelry made them judge me. Trust no one. You in heaven or hell, it don't matter. Somebody going to die. These were not lyrics attached to a rollout. They were personal statements. They reveal loneliness, distrust, exhaustion, and preoccupation with death. Yet social media conditions people to scroll past severity. The alarming sights next to the ordinary. In between those posts were updates about music and career moves. That contrast made it easier to overlook what was happening. What complicated the picture further was that he also shared optimistic messages not long before his passing. In one video, he spoke about how there was more to life. He said he was no longer in the streets. It sounded reflective, controlled, as if he was attempting to redirect himself. That duality, public hope mixed with visible despair, is often misunderstood. Looking back, the pattern feels clearer. The loneliness, the unresolved guilt, the chronic illness, the pressure of success, the hypervigilance that never switched off. It was all present at once. And while the outside world saw streams, contracts, and momentum, internally he was still trying to find a version of normal that had been disrupted years earlier. In his final weeks, he appeared grateful. He spoke about making it out, about focusing on his music, about growth. On the surface, it sounded steady, composed. But mental health does not move in a straight line. It shifts. One day there is clarity. The next, there is weight. Depression does not negotiate with success. It does not step aside because the numbers look good. It does not respect contracts, streams, or bank balances. It can sit quietly behind visible achievement. On February 18, 2026, at 11:23 a.m. Eastern Time, Jarius Mike Willer, known publicly as Lil Poppa, was pronounced dead in Fulton County, Georgia. He was 25 years old. The official cause of death has not been fully detailed publicly, but sources close to the situation indicated it was self-inflicted. There were immediate rumors about the method. Some claimed it involved a firearm. Others suggested pills. The specifics circulated quickly. The outcome did not change. A young man who had survived bullets years earlier was gone. What makes the timeline more difficult to process is that 72 hours before his death, he released a new single titled Out of Town. His career had not stalled. He was still recording, still distributing music, still holding millions of monthly listeners on Spotify. From the outside, the trajectory did not suggest collapse. It suggested continuation. His producer, Scotty, confirmed the death through a visibly shaken social media post. The reaction across hip-hop was immediate. Shock, confusion, grief. Here was an artist who had navigated one of the most violent cities in America, who had secured a deal with one of the strongest labels in the industry, who had built an audience far beyond Florida, yet peace remained out of reach. In the aftermath, speculation intensified. Some directed attention towards CMG. An older tweet resurfaced in which Poppa mentioned having 2 albums left before he would pack my shit and leave the label. For some observers, that line became evidence of tension. For others, it was simply frustration expressed in passing. The narrative quickly expanded beyond confirmed facts. But beneath the speculation sits a broader reality. The pressure placed on young men in hip-hop is relentless. Strength is expected. Vulnerability is often interpreted as weakness. There is an unspoken rule that pain must be converted into productivity. Poppa did speak about his struggles, in interviews, in lyrics, in fragments across social media. But expression is not the same as treatment. Writing about trauma does not automatically heal it. Mental health resources in communities like Jacksonville are limited. In environments where violence becomes normalized, trauma becomes routine. When grief is common, it often goes untreated. Where does someone process survivors' guilt when everyone around them is simply trying to survive? Who intervenes when hypervigilance feels normal? Poppa's story extends beyond charts and streaming milestones. It exposes the long shadow cast by gun violence. The 2018 shooting did not end when the bullets stopped. It initiated something internal. The loss of his friends did not remain in that moment. It followed him into success, into studios, into interviews, into silence. Every person who survives a shooting carries an imprint. Every individual who loses close friends to violence absorbs something that does not easily leave. For Poppa, that imprint appeared to compound over time. Success amplified visibility, but it did not reduce the weight he was carrying. His death forces a difficult reflection. Achievement does not guarantee stability. Public strength does not equal private peace. The trajectory from survival to success can still contain unresolved fractures. And sometimes those fractures remain unseen until it is too late. Trauma does not disappear because years pass. It does not weaken simply because a career advances. What happened in 2018 did not remain in 2018. It followed him. It shaped him. It resurfaced in lyrics, in interviews, in late-night posts that most people scrolled past. That reality matters. If you or someone you know is struggling with mental health, with thoughts of self-harm, with survivor's guilt, reach out. In the United States, the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is available. The crisis text line can be reached by texting HOME to 741741. Local mental health services exist as well. Silence is not strength. Isolation is not endurance. The outcome in this case shows what happens when pain compounds without sustained intervention. Rest in peace to Lil Poppa, Jarius Mike Willer. A talented artist who translated trauma into art with rare honesty. He survived the streets of Jacksonville. He survived a chronic illness that restricted his body. He survived losing his closest friends in a shooting that would have ended many others. But he could not survive the internal weight he carried. His catalog remains. It documents grief, fear, trust issues, hypervigilance, and survivors' remorse in ways that few artists articulated so clearly. His music stands as evidence of both his talent and his vulnerability. But his death underscores something more difficult. Visibility is not healing. Expression is not resolution. There has been speculation. Old tweets resurfaced, including one where he mentioned having 2 albums left before leaving his label. Some tried to build a narrative around tension with CMG. There is no confirmed evidence that label issues played a role in his death. If anything, Yo Gotti and CMG provided him with a larger platform. They amplified his voice. They supported his releases. The structural opportunity was there. The deeper issue traces back further. Back to 2018. Back to the drive-by that altered his internal landscape. Back to the survivor's guilt that never fully quieted. The industry can provide distribution. It cannot undo trauma. Jacksonville's rap scene absorbed another loss. The city had already mourned Foolio in 2023. Now another promising artist was gone. The pattern is difficult to ignore. Violence shapes these narratives long before fame arrives, and sometimes it continues to claim its impact even after an artist escapes physically. Some observers say they are no longer surprised by tragedy in hip-hop. But Poppa's death disrupted that cynicism. He was not widely associated with reckless behavior. He was not constantly in public confrontations. He appeared focused on music, on growth, on distancing himself from the streets. That made the outcome harder to process. He did what people often demand of artists. He spoke about depression. He addressed survivors' guilt. He confronted grief directly. He did not hide it behind vague metaphors. Yet articulation alone was not enough to counterbalance the weight he carried. His death exposes an uncomfortable truth within the culture. Success does not cure trauma. Wealth does not neutralize memory. Fame does not silence intrusive thoughts. If someone is managing chronic illness, compounded by survivor's guilt, compounded by hypervigilance from growing up in violence, the burden can intensify rather than fade. Poppa's story now sits alongside other artists who turned pain into art, but struggled to find sustainable peace. It forces a broader reflection on support systems, on intervention, on whether vulnerability in lyrics is being met with adequate care offstage. The narrative is not about failure. It is about untreated trauma that outlived its origin. Juice, Mac Miller, Rich Homie Quan. Talented young men who reached the highest levels of their profession, who stood on major stages, who moved millions of listeners, yet still lost battles that were never visible to the public. Each story carries its own circumstances. Each loss carries its own details. But there is a shared thread. Internal struggles do not disappear because external success arrives. What separated Poppa's struggle was the origin of his demons. They were rooted in survival, in being the one who walked away from a shooting while his friends did not, in carrying the unanswerable question of why he was spared. That weight is different. It attaches itself to identity. It lingers in quiet moments. It resurfaces in lyrics, in late-night thoughts, in the silence between performances. Lil Poppa's death should not be reduced to speculation or industry gossip. It should function as a wake-up call about how mental health is handled within our communities, particularly for young black men who are conditioned to suppress emotion. Strength is often misdefined as silence. Vulnerability is often treated as weakness. But when someone posts about being afraid to sleep, about feeling isolated, about crying alone in the dark, those are not aesthetic choices. Those are warning signs. The culture often celebrates resilience without examining the cost of it. Poppa embodied resilience. He endured illness. He endured violence. He endured grief. He turned all of it into art that resonated with thousands. But resilience without sustained support can become isolation. Expression without intervention can become exhaustion. If there is anything to take from his story, it is not simply mourning. It is awareness. Listening more closely when the signs are visible. Taking public vulnerability seriously, rather than treating it as content. Understanding that behind the image of success there may be someone quietly fighting battles that are not obvious. Lil Poppa made it out of Jacksonville physically. He built a career. He built an audience. But the trauma that followed him was not geographic. It was internal. And internal battles require more than talent to overcome. His music remains. The honesty remains. The story remains. What changes now is how seriously those warning signs are treated when they appear again in someone else.